So there seems to be some kind of renovation going on next door because I keep hearing drilling noises. I'm going to film as quickly as I can before those guys come back. So today we're talking about Scream Queens, and I'm doing a slightly different type of content today. Look in detail at the plot lines of the show, what happens in each episode, and do a very unnecessarily deep dive. This is a bit of a murder mystery whodunit, and I thought it needs to be explained. So even if you haven't seen the show, you can still understand and enjoy this video. Scream Queens is a satirical black comedy slasher series that started in 2015 with Ryan Murphy as the creator, and he's also worked on Glee and American Horror Story. Although those two series are really famous, Scream Queens tends to be more underrated, which is one of the reasons I wanted to address this, because now there seems to be a bit of an interest reigniting in the show again because they're actually working on a season 3. However, even though Scream Queens labels itself as a horror comedy, I would say that it's more verging on being a comedy because the jokes are often very funny, and as a result, the horror aspect of the show falls flat. It's hard to get scared when you're laughing the whole time at how ridiculous and absurd everything is, but I like that because for me, I find horror sometimes way too intense. If you're not a huge horror movie fan like me, then Scream Queens is probably more up your alley because it's not too overwhelming. This show is honestly very funny and it has a lot of great jokes, and I would totally rewatch it at some point. It seems like the perfect show to watch with your friends for a sleepover or something. It just has those vibes. But I get why people wouldn't like it even in the first season when the show is very strong. It reminds me a lot of Insatiable because many people found that show triggering and harmful rather than addressing social issues in a useful way. And Insatiable has a very similar dark comedy approach, but some people just didn't see the humor in it and they actually found it insulting. And a lot of people had the same reaction to Scream Queens. I understand why people would find a problem with someone like Chanel being the main character of Scream Queens. She's a powerful, rich, thin, white bully who's entitled and mean and picks on people who are less privileged than she is. Yet she's a fan favorite with comedic standout scenes.
Good evening, idiot hookers.
It's like the show's saying, I know she's a horrible person, but also she's quite funny and look how iconic she is. Although I just thought, well, it's dark comedy, she's meant to be mean, so she's being mean. They're showing us that she's mean by her making nasty comments. There were a few points that the show definitely did cross the line because I started to feel just uncomfortable, like what am I watching? That wasn't funny at all. Chanel is always coming out with nasty remarks about other people or even racist comments. She said something to Zayday like, I need to get a white pen so when I write on your skin it will actually be visible, and just constant little digs. And one of the frat boys, Earl Grey, who's actually played by that guy who was Alfie in Emily in Paris, but his whole personality trait is being a black British guy, and he has no other real dimension. I felt bad for the actor too because he basically played the same character in Emily in Paris who was known for being British. Especially when it comes to Chanel, I feel like that's where it's particularly bad because I think she should have been called out way more often or faced some more serious repercussions, because when the jokes or those nasty comments from Chanel are as frequent and regular as they are, it starts to seem as if the writers genuinely believe those things they're making her say, and they want to say these nasty, horrible things, but they know it's not appropriate, so they're trying to do it through someone else's mouth so they don't get called out for it. Chanel's sat next to this guy in class and he's helping her cheat on her exam, and then when the teacher says stop, Chanel's like, oh no, it's okay if he helps me cheat, he's my Asian.
Excuse me, Miss Oberlin, are you cheating?
God, no. Kaisi is my Asian.
And Sam is nicknamed Predatory Les before we know anything about her, and she does come across as a bit creepy in some of her scenes, but at other points she was fine. However, despite those things that didn't always make me at least feel comfortable, this show has a lot going for it in season 1. It's funny, completely absurd, and I like that it's set in college instead of high school, and I love the whole whodunit concept. Also, there are points that the show does try to subvert stereotypes and surprise us, and it actually does it successfully. For instance, the frat boys have quite a few moments where they're trying to play the hero and be those super macho types, but rather than that being played into, they are portrayed as comical and roguish and unintelligent. It's a nice subversion from those traditional overly masculine tough guys. And Grace's dad starts the show off as being this very stereotypical overprotective dad, but throughout the show he learns to give Grace some space, and by the end he acknowledges that he needs to let go of his control over her. And there's even this scene where he goes to seduce the dean and lies half naked on the bed, and him causing that distraction is funny because often in movies it's the woman that's required to sexualize herself, go and seduce someone in order to be a decoy or a distraction, but I thought it was really cool that they put Grace's dad into that role. Also, Scream Queens makes a lot of references to famous horror movies, which is so inventive and cool, and I love it. They make a reference to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the shower scene in Psycho, The Shining, and more. And I'm sure there are plenty I missed because I'm not a huge horror movie fanatic. And one of my favorite scenes is the dean in the shower, and it's a shot-by-shot recreation of the shower scene in Psycho, which was always a famous scene because the woman was the first main character in cinematic history to be killed off really early into a movie or something like that. The actress who plays her is the mother of Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays the dean in Scream Queens, so technically she's recreating her own mum's iconic shower scene, which is so cute. Jamie told Variety that beforehand she'd spent her life avoiding the shower on screen, and she said, "I have attempted to step out of the shadow of my parents for a long time. It felt like they're both gone now and enough time has passed, so this role has appeared in my life and it's unexpected and delightful." Another thing I love about Scream Queens is the subtle references and parallels it has to famous chick flicks like Mean Girls, Heathers, which isn't really a chick flick, but Heathers, and Gossip Girl. It's so cool. Now I've given you that little introduction about the vibe of the show, let's get into the pilot episode. There's this flashback to 1995, and there's a bunch of sorority girls at the Kappa Kappa Tower House partying, having fun, and then they go upstairs and see this girl who's given birth in the bathtub and she's covered in blood. But the sorority girls are neglectful and not paying attention because they want to go and enjoy the party, so they actually left her for a bit even though she was bleeding out, and so when they came back she died. It's their fault for not taking care of her. The girl who's died in the bathtub is called Sophia. Now it's the present day, years later, around 2015. We're at Wallace University. Dean Munch asks Chanel Oberlin to come to her office so she can speak to her. The dean tells Chanel that she knows for a fact that Chanel was the one who injured the previous Kappa president, Melanie Dorkus.
I hate sororities and I hate you. For years I've seen the damage your so-called sisterhoods have had on young girls.
So let's talk about these two characters first, the dean and Chanel, because they're the first ones we're introduced to. The dean is a very suspicious character, and I thought she was the killer for a long time when I was watching. She is in a position of power, she knows what's going on at the school, and a lot of the murders that start taking place happen in the sorority house. And I know for a fact that the dean does not like Chanel's sorority, so I thought she was trying to punish her or shut the sorority down by having loads of murders take place. And another reason I didn't like her was because she was actually hooking up with one of the students at the school called Chad, and I found that very creepy because it's a huge abuse of power. The girl in her office is the meanest girl in school, and she's also a huge suspect for being the killer. And I genuinely started the show, and in the first few episodes I was convinced that Chanel was somehow going to be the main murderer or the mastermind behind it all. Emma Roberts, who plays her, honestly should have gotten more recognition for this role because she nails it. And throughout the show, often when Chanel loses her cool, she'll start brandishing a knife or something, and at some point Chanel and her cronies do use poison. But what I think is really interesting is the physical use of knives by the women in the show, because often in movies women aren't meant to be like too aggressive or get dirty when they fight or anything, so they stick to poison and you don't see them brandishing weapons. But I like in this show that the girls will brandish knives or something. But Chanel is very spoiled, extremely rich and entitled. She needs to bully people, not because she's a bad bitch, but because she's actually deeply insecure, and the only way that she can feel remotely in control and on top is by picking on other people, which is sadly common. Her parents don't really care about her and forget her birthday. Her boyfriend doesn't even seem to like her that much and goes off with other girls all the time. And she's never had true friends, nor does she know how to maintain or make them.
Good morning, Slits.
Good morning, Chanel.
Chanel names her friends, aka her cronies, after her. Chanel number 2, Chanel number 3. She doesn't care what their real names are. The fact that they're named after her is a clear reference to the movie Heathers, where all the girls are named Heather after their leader. Then we switch to Grace Gardner. She's there to almost combat or level out Chanel's toxicity, because Grace is, I'd say, the other main character, but she's more the good girl archetype. She could be seen as the stereotypical final girl who makes it through to the end of the horror movie, but Grace still subverts an expectation we have as an audience, because her morals become more dubious and twisted as the show continues, and her relationship with her dad doesn't go so well. Her father West takes her in his car to the university.
I'm gonna ask you just one more time. Please don't join a sorority. Look, I know girls can be vicious.
Look, Dad, I'm gonna be fine, okay?
It is revealed that Grace's mum died when she was 2, which is relevant to the story. She convinces her new roommate and friend Zayday to join the Kappa sorority with her, so she has a friend there.
I'm gonna rush Kappa Kappa Tau. Hey, why don't you join with me?
Girl, I'd rather die.
Zayday is also a really sweet, cool character, but I wish they could have done more with her. She does a few things, like she tries at points to defend the other girls from Chanel, which doesn't really come to anything. She at one point says they should have a sleepover and takes command of that. So she does start the sleepover, but then Chanel takes over the sleepover anyway. And she does turn on Grace a bit at the end of the show when things aren't going to plan. So Zayday had a lot of potential, but then she could have taken things further and didn't, so she ends up being in this weird middle ground where she's starting to change up the show but isn't really. But Zayday has a lot of good qualities, and I especially like how towards the end of the show she's still really gracious and forgiving of Chanel. I think Zayday is a good person. Grace, though, is not my favourite character. She's actually one of my least favourites, not because she did anything wrong per se, but it's because, again, a bit like Zayday, she doesn't really do anything. I was hoping there'd be, at the end of the show, one more final plot twist involving her character. I was hoping that maybe her father would be the killer, or she would be the killer, or something really dramatic like that would happen, because the show seemed to be building into it and hinting at it, but then it doesn't come to anything. Anyway, there's an announcement that Kappa sorority will have to accept any new pledges that want to join.
This year, Kappa will be required to accept anyone who wants to become a pledge.
What fresh hell is this?
And Chanel is so pissed off about this, because Chanel has very specific requirements for the kinds of girls that she wants to join her sorority, because she's a horrible person. There's this other weird girl who's not as important, but she's obsessed with Taylor Swift. There's Sam, the predatory Les, as some of them call her, which is a bit weird. And there's Jennifer too, who terrifies Chanel with her candle obsession. One of the new pledges who arrives is Hester, who wears this full body brace due to severe scoliosis. She's a bit of a weirdo, kind of nerdy, but she has this bizarre death obsession, and she gets actually aroused by dead bodies, and she's always making comments like, oh, that knife would cut through flesh perfectly, or whatever. She's creepy and seems so obviously like the sort of person that would be a serial killer that you don't even think that she would be the killer, because it's just too obvious, and she seems like a very clear red herring. She's also a massive Chanel wannabe and will do anything to protect Chanel or get Chanel's approval. But later on, when she gets her makeover, she wants to take Chanel's life, and she wants to lead the sorority. She wants to steal Chanel's boyfriend. So you can imagine how Chanel's annoyed when she sees someone like Hester turning up to be a pledge, because Chanel is very selective when it comes to her sorority, and her boyfriend Chad even tells her, I'm going to break up with you if you have a bunch of losers in your sorority, because that's going to affect my social standing. This makes Chanel determined to find a way to freak out all the girls so they'll leave and not want to join the sorority, because she wants to stay together with Chad. She has 3 main minions at the time who are already part of her sorority, and they're ones she's actually chosen and selected and likes. Chanel number 2, who's played by Ariana Grande. Nice and ditzy, but she also seems like a bit of a backstabber. Sadie, better known as Chanel number 3, is sensible and sassy. She's sarcastic, but seems to be the most secure in herself and less of a tryhard. Her earmuffs resemble Princess Leia in Star Wars, because the actress's mum actually played Princess Leia in Star Wars. Chanel number 3 later also finds out that she's the serial killer Charles Manson's daughter, which makes her paranoid that people will find out, because she knows that people will then assume that she's the killer because she's related to one. The final Chanel is Chanel number 5. Uptight, very sensitive, emotional, and conservative. She's also the smartest out of all the Chanels, but she feels like she's continually unrecognized. She is a suck-up, but at the same time, she hates how Chanel treats her, and she's desperate for approval and validation, and when she doesn't get it, it makes her feel angry and bitter. Number 5 is constantly mocked by Chanel. She's basically Chanel's punching bag, which is why Chanel keeps her around. It's like every time they had a conversation, there was some sort of dig going in Chanel number 5's direction. She's the most open-minded though out of all the Chanels. For instance, at first when she meets Hester, she's like, oh my god, what is that neck brace? I don't want to know that girl. I don't want her to be part of the sorority. But then as she starts to get to know Hester and she sees Hester's mutual dislike for Chanel number 1, Chanel number 5 and Hester start to bond more, and she starts to become more accepting of her. We all thought she had the potential to be the murderer because she has a perfect motivation and she has a lot of inside info about how the sorority works. Also, I'm not sure this actress was the best choice for Chanel number 5. And the actress Abigail Breslin I actually saw in The Call with Halle Berry, and she played a kidnap victim in that. And her acting was unbelievable in that movie. But in this show, I just don't think it's the right kind of role for her, because I was kind of cringing at a few of her scenes, and I just feel like she's the weakest out of all the actresses on the show, especially involving scenes where she's meant to be indignant or offended, insulted, or angry. Anyway, Grace goes to a coffee shop called The Grind, and she meets a real cutie called Pete Martinez, and he warns her about Kappa House, saying that it's dangerous and not to join.
You can't join Kappa Tau.
I joined that sorority to feel close to my mom.
She died when I was really little.
I think all these sororities are evil, but that house is truly dangerous.
Pete and Grace seem to form a bit of a connection, and you can tell that maybe this will lead to some flirtationship of some kind. But later, Chanel decides that it's time to scare the pledges and get rid of them once and for all. She has this housemaid called Miss Bean. She wants to push Miss Bean's face into the deep fat fryer. Not on, just like make her face wet and embarrass her and then scare everyone thinking that maybe it was on. So she goes and pushes Miss Bean's face into the fat fryer, but the deep fat fryer was on, which is really weird, and everyone assumes that Chanel was doing it on purpose because Miss Bean collapses with her whole face burned and actually dies, and the girls are like, oh my god, Chanel, you're a murderer, and Chanel's like, no, I didn't even turn the deep fat fryer on, which leaves a question as to who did. But everyone starts screaming, and Grace storms out intending to call the police. But then Chanel bribes the other girls except Zayday with a trip to Cancun in Mexico, and then she says that she'll say that Grace was the one who killed Miss Bean if anyone tells the police, and then all the girls agree to back up her story. So if Grace does go to tell the police, they'll all say that she did it and no one will believe her because it's like all of their words against hers. The girls then hide the dead body in a freezer, unaware that Pete, that guy who worked in the coffee shop, is actually watching them to try and understand what's going on. Later on, Grace finds Pete and confesses that indeed he was right, the sorority's messed up, and she confesses what Chanel did. But Pete admits that he already saw them take care of the body, and he actually wants to be like an investigative reporter, and he wants him and Grace to team up so they can find out the deep dark secrets of the sorority house. Grace says, well, I've got the inside info because I'm going to be a member of the sorority, so I'll give you information from the inside. I love this idea. Anything involving like investigations, I'm obsessed with it, and I thought the show did an excellent job of setting up some real intrigue and mystery around what's in this sorority. Everyone then goes to the freezer to examine the body of Miss Bean, but it's missing. This is a common pattern throughout the show. Someone stealing the dead bodies, and you have no idea where they're going. Later on, the Chanels take a blood oath to promise that they'll never speak of what happened to Miss Bean. But Chanel number 2, aka Ariana Grande, is actually a bit more moral around this, and she's like, you know what guys, I can't stay silent, I'm gonna leave. So she goes to her room to pack. She's interrupted by the Red Devil. He tries to murder her, and so she goes to her computer to type out a tweet saying that he's killing her, but then right before she can send the tweet, she dies. But then she remembers that she hasn't posted her tweet, so she revives herself for a second, posts the tweet, and then dies. Later on, the other Chanels discover the body, and for some reason they decide not to tell the police, but they're just going to figure out how to hide it, and then they need to know what they're going to do next. It's actually a shame that Ariana Grande died so early on, because although it's cool she's the first murder victim of this Red Devil person, It is also a shame because if she'd stayed alive, then I reckon a lot of viewers would have stayed watching for longer and they could have got an actual feel for Scream Queens and kept watching it for the show rather than for Ariana Grande, because I bet a lot of people that tuned into the pilot episode were purely watching it for her, and then when she died they just stopped watching rather than actually giving the show a chance, because the pilot episode isn't perfect because the show's still finding its feet, but it gets really good as it goes on. Because Chanel's still trying to discourage the girls from joining the sorority, Chanel number 3 and Chanel number 5 bury the new pledges up to their heads in the house garden and leave them for the night as a way of, I guess, scaring them and making them reluctant to join the sorority at all. As the girls are chilling there, the Red Devil guy, that weird murderer person in that costume, on the lawnmower he goes right towards Tiffany, the girl who's obsessed with Taylor Swift, and he actually decapitates her. Iconic. And that was such a great ending to the episode. So let's start with the next episode, Hell Week. The sorority welcomes Denise, who's this completely incompetent and hilarious security guard. She obviously knows that girl had been decapitated by someone, so there's some sort of killer on the loose, and Denise is there to protect them, even though she admits she doesn't have a gun.
If you are in danger, scream Denise Hempfield's name real loud.
The Chanels still don't know what to do with Chanel number 2, aka Ariana Grande's body, but they decide to put the body in the same freezer where they put Miss Bean's. Grace goes to the house basement and she finds a mysterious locked door and tries to open it, and only Chanel has the key of that door, and Grace tells Pete about the secret door. He says that would make sense because apparently the house has some sort of secret, so he's going to go to the dean's office and have a look around for some files which might be able to tell them what this secret is if it was ever on record. For some reason, because Pete and Grace reach this realization and decision at the same time, this moment is so arousing to them that they start passionately kissing. Then Grace stops him and says, "We can't kiss because there's a killer on the loose," which to me, I'm like, if there was a killer on the loose, surely that would make you more keen to kiss him because, you know, you could be dead in 2 minutes, so why the hell not? But apparently that means you shouldn't kiss him until the killer's dead. I don't get her logic. I'm just saying she hasn't thought this through properly. Grace actually managed to break into the secret room and she sees this bloodied bathtub in there, and Chanel tells her that it happened 20 years ago, that a girl died in that same bathtub. She also reveals that the dean probably knew about what had happened and then covered it up, which is why there might not be any files on record about what happened. Grace asks herself, I wonder who that baby was. Meanwhile, Grace's father, Wes, wants to remove Grace from the school because he's a very protective dad and he's worried about this murder. Then a flirty dean convinces him to keep his daughter at school, but then he asks if he can actually stay on as a professor at the college to keep an eye on her. Later on, Pete tries to break into the dean's office and he tries to do that really subtle thing where you just make a small incision in the glass of the door and then reach through and like unlock it from the front, but all he does is completely shatter the door so the whole thing collapses, which is probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole show because it's hilarious. He finds an archive with some names that can be related with Kappa's past, so he writes them on a sheet, unaware that the Red Devil is behind him. The killer hits him in the head and Pete wakes up, tied outside somewhere with a sign in his chest saying "Mind your own business." Why didn't they kill him? At his dormitory, Grace tries to tell him about the Kappa legend of the girl in the bathtub. Grace opens the closet to get him a shirt or something, and she sees the Red Devil costume in his closet, and she freaks out assuming he's the killer. But he actually says that it's not like there's only one person in a Red Devil costume because it's the school mascot, but she doesn't believe him and she actually leaves. When she was out at night, she did see someone in the Red Devil costume, so she kind of knows what they look like. Meanwhile, we see what's going on with Chad, Chanel's boyfriend. He's with his roommate Boone, who says that he's scared of whoever this killer is, and he asks if he can climb into bed with Chad. Apparently in the past it's been a problem where Boone's tried to touch him inappropriately, and he knows that Boone's gay and he's like, "Can I trust you to get into bed with me without you doing anything?" basically, which is so messed up. But Chanel enters the room because she's trying to fix her messy relationship with Chad, and then she sees the two of them in bed together and completely gets the wrong idea and freaks out, and then Chad breaks up with her and calls her homophobic and says that she just can't deal with the fact that everyone wants to sleep with him, including guys. Then at night, Denise, the new security guard, and her friend Shondell fall asleep outside of the Kappa house in their car, but then Denise hears a scream, and so she leaves her friend Shondell sleeping in the car. She goes into the house. When she comes back to the car, Shondell's been stabbed in the throat. I mean, I don't know if she was expecting Shondell to answer. Denise goes to drive off, and then she realizes that she's too scared to drive off with Shondell's body in the car, so she pushes the body out of the car and keeps driving. Inside the house, the girls find a note written on the wall that says sluts will die. To the point, I like it. And at the same time, inside the Dickie Dollar Scholar's house, they find a dead Boone lying on the dinner table with his throat cut. So it's pretty clear that there's a serial killer on the loose. There has to be at least 2 killers, because how could they go from killing Boone to killing Shondell? And writing a note on the wall that says sluts will die. There has to be at least 2 killers, if not more. But at the end of the episode, the Red Devil goes to the mortuary, however you say it, and pulls out Boone's dead body in one of the drawers. But then Boone opens his eyes and pulls off this fake cut on his neck. So he actually faked his death. He is totally in league with the killers. So now we've got the identity of our first Red Devil, which is Boone. The next episode is called Chainsaw, and it's definitely in my top 3 for favourite episodes in the show. I just love the idea of the killer changing up how they kill people and having a chainsaw. Sometimes it's an axe, sometimes it's a chainsaw, sometimes it's a knife. It keeps it fresh, you know, it keeps it peachy. They introduce a new school mascot rather than the Red Devil, which is Coney, basically a giant ice cream cone. I guess because people were all talking about this Red Devil on campus, it no longer felt appropriate to have a Red Devil as the school mascot. Zayday and Grace are looking for Chanel number 2's door because they haven't seen her in a while. But then when they get into her room, they find blood on the floor and they still can't see where she is. Denise comes in and says that it's definitely blood on the ground. She also shows Grace and Zayday the panicked tweet Ariana Grande sent before she was murdered saying, "Help me, I'm being murdered by the Red Devil." But then Grace says, "Are you sure she's been murdered?" Because apparently Chanel number 2 is still posting cute pictures on Instagram. Now it's pretty obvious to us that the Chanels don't want anyone to know that Ariana's dead, so they've got her phone and they're posting for her.
The girl is dead.
Look, I agree that it does sort of seem that way, but here's what's confusing to me. Look, number 2 is still posting on Instagram. There she is by the pool sunbathing.
Picture's not even cute.
Denise, Grace and Zayday head to Ariana Grande's parents' house and they have a talk with her parents. The parents really don't give a shit about her, so that's not very helpful. They do learn some useful information, which is that Chanel number 2 was indeed a bit of a backstabber and she was having a secret relationship with Chanel's boyfriend, Chad. Although it's not surprising because Chad will sleep with anything that moves. When they sit down in class, Grace learns that the teacher is her father, Wes, there to keep an eye on her, and she is so mad. They have a huge argument and she ends up leaving because she feels smothered by him, which I find hilarious. There's literally a serial killer, of course he's trying to look after you. Then Wes, who's also a dumbass, thinks it's a good idea to show his new class a movie, which is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, even though there's a serial killer. So he's like, "Kids, watch this." He plays it and then says, "Thanks guys, thanks for coming, bye." While the movie is playing, Gigi sneaks in and sits down. We have met Gigi in earlier episodes, but basically she's a lawyer and also works at the school, and she has a huge crush on Grace's dad, Wes, and she was actually like flirting with him in the last episode. She's like one of those people that pretends to be nice and is all super smiley all the time, but you can tell it's completely fake. She's really pushing for them to go out sometime too, which is a bit awkward because he doesn't seem as into it as she's into it. But then the dean arrives and she seems really jealous because she's actually got a big crush on Wes because she wants to have him for herself, and so she kind of threatens Gigi and is like, "Can you stay away from my man, please?" Gigi though, even though she has this whole cutesy girl act, she will not have it and she's still pursuing Wes with no regard or fear for how the dean will react. So Gigi acts like all innocent, but when it comes to getting what she wants, she gets what she wants. They also agreed that they'll both move into Kappa House for a week to keep an eye on everything. Later on, Sam, the new pledge, otherwise known as Predatory Les by Chanel, is setting up some pictures in her room of sexualized women or something when Chanel number 3 comes in and talks about Charles Manson being her dad and how that makes her insecure, and she actually has some flirty vibes going on with Sam. And what's cute about this is they actually end up kissing later when they're playing Spin the Bottle in like the next episode or something, which is really sweet. And I thought it was nice to see Chanel number 3 realizing that she's just in love with love, which is what she says, and she doesn't really care about who it is, more about how the person makes her feel, which I thought was really wholesome. For a few minutes in a hilarious sequence of events, which is again one of my favorite scenes in the show, we follow Coney, the new school mascot, who is loving his life as mascot because he wears his costume 24/7 around the college campus for some reason, which means he can get away with whatever he wants because no one really knows who he is, and he gets his 15 minutes of fame, he's stealing money, doing whatever he wants.
When you put on a costume, you can get away with anything.
But then he is brutally murdered and sawed in half by the Red Devil. Hester, the one who kind of wants to have Chanel's life, enters her closet and starts looking at stuff and trying stuff on, but then Chanel appears and she seems kind of disappointed in Hester, and she says, hey, this closet is not for you, this closet is my second home and it's like a second vagina to me.
This closet is the most precious thing in my life. It's like a second vagina to me.
Which was so brilliant because earlier we had this scene of a really brutal murder, and to immediately contrast that with such a hilarious line, it really threw me off guard and took me by surprise, and I loved it. To Hester's surprise, Chanel isn't like mad at her. Instead, Chanel says, you know what, I should give you a makeover. Otherwise, Chad will think that my sorority is full of new pledges who are losers, so I need to un-loser you. So she gives Hester a makeover and makes her look like a mini version of herself. Later on, Grace talks to Chanel number 5, the insecure emotional one, about Chanel number 2 and Chad dating, and it's revealed that both Chanel number 3 and Chanel number 5 dated Chad behind Chanel's back as well. So basically every Chanel has dated Chad without Chanel's knowledge. Chanel comes down the stairs with a newly transformed Hester, who has now been nicknamed Chanel number 6, and the girls are in shock. They're like, oh my god, you can't add another Chanel to the group, that's unfair. Chanel needed a new replacement because now Ariana Grande's dead, she needs her posse back together stronger than ever. There's not a strong sisterhood between the girls. This isn't really a show about strong female friendship.
Bitch, I'm about to smack you so hard your tampon's gonna pop out.
None of the new pledges have formed particularly strong bonds with each other, and to be honest, the closest friendship in the show seems to be between Grace and Zayday, but it's not even that close. The Chanels live in fear of Chanel number 1. Also, regarding Hester's makeover, this is a really key moment that addresses the theme of femininity in Scream Queens, because that's always a theme in the show. The Chanels put on this sexualized, very feminine identity, and that's what makes them powerful, not what makes them weak. Having a makeover, doing their hair wearing pink, is what makes them feel superior to other people and stronger. It's also funny that Chanel is named Chanel, which always makes me think of the perfume, so it's like drawing connections between femininity and consumerism. Chanel views femininity as wearing pink and pearls. Giving Hester a makeover highlights the importance they place on physical appearance, and after getting this makeover, Hester becomes more like seductive and powerful. Later on, Grace visits Pete and apologizes for jumping to conclusions and assuming he was the killer simply because he had the mascot's costume in his closet. However, Pete is still not off the hook because he's behaving suspiciously. The frat brothers are feeling pretty sick of all these murders or disappearances taking place, so they decide to take on and kill the Red Devil themselves. They start getting baseball bats, smashing cars, and yelling out the Red Devil's name.
You like me now, bro? You like me now when I got a baseball bat, bro?
And then the Red Devil appears. This is one of my favorite scenes again. The Red Devil is holding a chainsaw, and that's when they know they're screwed. And then they turn around and another Red Devil is there, so there's 2 killers holding a chainsaw as well.
Oh my god, there's 2 of them! This up from the bird!
One of the guys gets knocked out, all their baseball bats get sawed in half, and one of the guys gets both his arms sliced off. Later on, Denise, the security guard, asks Zayday to join her in her car, and then she handcuffs Zayday and claims that she's the killer. She says that she found a chainsaw under Zayday's bed, which Zayday claims was one that her grandma gave to her, and it's not dodgy at all. Props to Denise for actually, you know, doing something investigative and good. Later on, Gigi and the dean have ended up moving into the sorority to keep an eye on everything, and Gigi goes to sleep downstairs. She's a bit unsettled by the Dean's music choices, which is why she sleeps downstairs, because the Dean plays really creepy horror slasher music and stuff, which again, I was so set on the Dean being the killer. I was really convinced. But as Gigi's sleeping downstairs, suddenly the Red Devil gets into the house and tries to kill her. In my mind now, Gigi was less of a suspect for being a Red Devil simply because I saw her get attacked. The Chanels and Sam run down the stairs and they go to call 911 and the Red Devil escapes. Then the Dean, who was half asleep, runs downstairs like, what the hell's going on? And then Wes grabs the chainsaw and he points it at her and says, don't come any closer. We know that you're the killer. This show really loves to take the piss out of mistakes that are constantly made in horror movies, like people pointing the finger and accusing each other with no evidence, because we see that all the time, right? And it's very frustrating. The next episode is Haunted House. The Dean argues that it's ridiculous because how could she have gone downstairs somehow, gotten dressed up in a costume, attacked Gigi, and then ran upstairs and then gotten back into her pajamas and come downstairs in the space of 10 seconds, and it made no sense. Denise then rushes into the house and tells them about the frat boys being attacked and that one guy getting both his arms sawed off. Grace and Pete then drive to a trailer which is owned by Mandy, one of the sorority girls involved in the negligence that killed that pregnant woman 20 years ago. And she said that in 1995, the Dean did indeed get involved to help cover up the death of the girl in the bathtub. So she forced the girls to wear hoods while she drove them to a discreet location and they buried the body. The Dean told all the girls to leave the uni, make up an excuse as to why they had to go and never contact each other again. One of them ended up killing herself because she felt so guilty, and another one ended up going to an asylum, and another one made it into Fox News. And then Mandy reveals that the baby born was indeed a girl. So Grace and Pete thank her for that very useful info, and Mandy's chilling alone in her caravan. Obviously she's really isolated because then the Red Devil arrives and brutally murders her, but no one would even know because I don't get the vibe she has many friends. Later on in Wes's class as a professor, yet again the kids are watching a horror movie. Grace appears and confronts him and asks about the woman who died in the bathtub and if she's the baby of the woman who died in the bathtub and if the woman in the bathtub was her mum. That doesn't make sense though, because Grace was told that her mum died when she was 2, not immediately after giving birth to her, so I don't know, but she's thinking maybe her dad's lying because he's suspicious. When leaving the building, she receives a text from Pete to meet her at this house in Shady Lane. So she goes there and it's this proper haunted house. Zayday is there too at the haunted house and she says that she's having a haunted house charity there. This is because Zayday is actually now running against Chanel to be the Kappa president, which is such a good idea because Chanel needed to be taken down. Then Denise, the security guard, appears, scaring them, and she tells them the story of the Hag of Shady Lane, saying that this house is haunted and it has a dark history. The Hag of Shady Lane used to live in this abandoned shack and she took care of the bathtub baby. In the university cafeteria, Chanel and her minions are handing out flyers for their pumpkin patch, and then they run into this guy called Tommy or Timmy, and he starts really objectifying and sexualizing Chanel and her friends and hitting on them, and they're kind of insulted. Then they go in this very weird rant pointing to the sexualization of women. They start beating the crap out of him and everyone cheers, and I was just cringing. I just felt like that was such a bad scene and so unnecessary to the plot. I know we've raised a lot of awareness about straight harassment now and stuff, but this was such a cringy way to address it, and I didn't feel like I was rooting for Chanel and her friends in that scene because violence is not the answer either. Later on, Chad's at a graveyard being aroused by death, and he sees Hester there and he realizes that they have this thing in common where they're both actually kind of turned on by death. Hester then seduces him, which is really bad because she's one of Chanel's kind of friends. She's been given a makeover and everything by her. So they go to that Hag of Shady Lane's shack to have sex. But then when they're there, they discover every single dead body of every person that's been murdered so far. Then at the end, Gigi is revealed to be the Hag of Shady Lane, wailing and moaning like the myth says she did. And I like this scene a lot, but it was placed way too early on. I feel like they revealed that Gigi was suspicious so prematurely. It took me by surprise. I liked that they made it her a lot, but I wish they could have dragged it out a bit longer. Hester walks into the kitchen and sees number 5 making toenail cookies to give to Chanel or something because she's just resentful towards her. Still, it's kind of pathetic. And then Hester says, hey, let's team up and do something bad to Chanel. Let's get rid of her. They then convince Jennifer, the candle-obsessed girl, to join them. They're all just sick of Chanel, and as we know, Hester has now taken Chanel's boyfriend, but it's not enough for her. She wants to take over her life. So Chanel's in class doing her test, but then she's actually arrested for the murder of Miss Bean because the other girls have turned her in for it. Chanel is put in the car and she looks over her shoulder and sees the girls there and realizes that they've betrayed her. Luckily, Chanel's bail was paid by Chanel number 3 and Sam because they weren't trying to sabotage her. Chanel then walks into her closet and is outraged to see Chanel number 5 there trying on her Halloween costume as if she's just going to take over Chanel's life now too. Chanel is angry and she reveals something weird. She says that after her bail, Hester and Jennifer told her that Chanel number 5 was the one who told the police about what Chanel did to Miss Bean. Is that true? No. Which means that Hester's manipulated the situation to put the blame on Chanel number 5 so that Hester wouldn't look like the one who'd dobbed her in, even though it was Hester's idea in the first place. And Chanel number 5 is mortified. She's like, no, it was Hester's idea. I was convinced to join. Hester's the mastermind behind this. She's the one that wants to see you in jail, but Chanel doesn't believe her. And she's like, you always wanted to get rid of me, didn't you, number 5? And because number 5 has always been her punching bag, Chanel is happy to make fun of her and assume that Chanel number 5's out to get her because that's unfortunately been the dynamic of their relationship. As a punishment, Chanel forces number 5 to go into the pumpkin patch at night, even though there's a serial killer on the loose, and light the candles and stuff. So Chanel number 5 goes into the pumpkin patch with her 2 boyfriends who are brothers, Roger and Dodger, and when they're there, the Red Devil attacks them. They're all freaked out, running through the maze trying to escape, and in the middle of running away, both brothers stop her and say that it's time for her to choose which of them she loves, which is so funny because I feel like they always do that in movies where they do love proclamations right in the middle of like a battle or something, but she chooses the brother she wants and they run away, and one of the brothers, the one she didn't choose, is brutally murdered. Now, at the end of the previous episode, we actually learned that Zayday had been kidnapped, but that's all we knew. But in this episode, we see where she's been taken, because in this episode, she's now in the Red Devil's lair. He opens a door in the ground with Zayday below. She starts shouting before the door is closed, and he's actually carrying a fluffy white dog, so it's a reference to the Silence of the Lambs. It's a very clear pointer to that movie, and I love that movie. There are multiple Silence of the Lambs references actually in this show. But now Grace, Pete, and Gigi and Wes know that Zayday's missing and potentially dead, so they're searching for her. Back at Kappa, Chanel's trying to take advantage of the fact that Zayday's been kidnapped by calling the presidential elections now, saying, oh well, I guess Zayday didn't turn up. But then Zayday appears and she's miraculously escaped from the tunnel. She tells them that she was brought up from the tunnel to have dinner with the Red Devil, and he'd laid out candles and everything to make it all romantic, which means that the Red Devil is in love with her, which is why he didn't kill her, but she subdues him and escapes. Later that night, Gigi is revealed as the mastermind behind the whole thing, because she goes to meet with the Red Devil and tells him off for the sloppiness of the Zayday kidnapping incident. And she says, I know you're in love with Zayday, but we're meant to kill, not kidnap. The next episode is called 7 Minutes in Hell, and this is one of my favorite episodes, again in my top 3, because I love the idea of the slumber party this episode has, and the idea of the girls being trapped in the house together, which is what happens. The girls vote for president, and it's a tie between Zayday and Chanel, so now they're both co-presidents. Zayday and Grace suggest they throw a slumber party and play Truth or Dare to find out who this murderer is. They actually end up playing Spin the Bottle instead. Then all the doors and windows are locked, because Chanel, after watching a horror movie, had a really intense security system installed, but now it's malfunctioned, so they're trapped inside the house. The frat boys arrive with a ladder, so Chad climbs up the ladder, smashes a window, and comes in to save Chanel. Chad looks out the window and sees the Red Devil coming towards him in the garden, so they're all climbing up the ladder as quickly as they can, but the one guy who can't get up in time is the one who lost both his arms in the chainsaw attack. The Red Devil knocks him off the ladder and decapitates him. Then the Red Devil somehow gets inside and finds Sam and kills her. The Red Devil gets to a different room and kills Roger, Chanel number 5's boyfriend, but then Chanel looks around and notices that the one guy they know who isn't there is Pete. He's not with the frat boys. Soon Chad finds a trapdoor in Chanel's room, which makes sense because it would explain how the Red Devil's getting through all these places so quickly and disappearing. Down in the tunnel, the Red Devil appears with 2 axes and chases the girls, but they manage to escape. In the bathroom, Chanel number 3 and Chanel number 5 are distraught by what's happening, and they're still a bit resentful towards Chanel, their leader. So they make a pact that they will both outlive Chanel number 1 no matter what. And I was hoping this would lead to something important, like maybe Chanel would die in the finale and they'd both outlive her or something, but it doesn't come to anything. Chanel number 5 shows Chanel an Ouija board thing. I hope I said that right. And she says that they can use it to contact Ariana Grande, aka Chanel number 2, from beyond the grave and find out how she died and who killed her. So they go to talk to Chanel number 2, and it seems like they are actually communicating with her dead spirit. Ariana Grande, through the board, tells Chanel that Chad is cheating on her, and it really pisses Chanel off because she'd got Chad to promise he'd be monogamous. But then what makes it even worse is that the board says that Chanel is the killer, which makes Chanel even more pissed off. And she's like, okay, Ariana Grande is bitching with me from beyond the grave and making shit up to be nasty because that is not true and I'm not the killer. And at this point, I believed it. I really didn't think that Chanel number 1 was the killer.
She says you are.
That's it! I am done with this dead, lying bitch!
Anyway, the minions actually do believe Ariana Grande, and they're like, you know what? We need to kill Chanel because she's going to kill us. She's already killed Miss Bean and she's going to keep going. Then while Chanel is asleep, Ariana Grande, aka Chanel number 2, visits her in her sleep in like a weird hallucinogenic dream thing and says, hey, by the way, the other Chanels are plotting to kill you tonight, so you need to have your wits about you. And then she apologizes for saying that Chanel was the killer because she was just a bit salty, and she also apologizes for saying that Chad's cheating and stuff, and she feels bad. This encourages Chanel to go and tell off her minions for trying to kill her, so she gives them all microscopes and says, girls, let's not fight, let's go and target the real bad guys here, who are Grace and Zayday, because it's not me, I know it's not any of you, so it has to be those 2. Now this I do believe was a writing mistake. Not that she'd want to entrust them with helping her, but the fact that she would trust Hester and still have her as Chanel number 6. Because let me tell you, she knew, she'd seen Hester hitting on Chad, and she knew there was this weird flirtationship going on between them and stuff that bothered her. And the fact that she would still have her on the team is weird, especially when she'd said to Hester, I am never going to trust you again.
Because you also tried to have sex with Chad number 6, and you tried to frame me for murder. I mean, I went to jail because of you.
I am so sorry, Chanel. I promise to never betray your trust again.
You most certainly won't betray my trust ever again, because you will never have my trust ever again.
Anyway, later on, Grace is shopping for clothes with Gigi. Gigi's still dating Grace's dad, but Gigi asks whether Grace and Pete have thought of investigating Feather McCarthy, because Feather, who they've never heard of, was the 19-year-old the dean's husband left her for. She had a feud with the dean, so it makes sense that the dean could be the killer, and it would explain why the letters on the wall had said sluts will die. Maybe she considers 19-year-old younger girls sluts. Obviously, as we know, Gigi is the real mastermind behind this, so all she's trying to do is set Grace off track. And we know through Feather that after the husband asked to divorce the dean, she went totally ballistic. I completely forgot to mention to you that I've tried to dress like the Chanels today. I hope it doesn't look like I just wore this for no reason. Anyway, Stephen, the ex-husband, asked Feather to move in with him and be the love of his life. So she does. One day, Feather comes home to see her boo and he's dead. She thinks that the dean killed her husband, well, ex-husband, out of annoyance that he would leave her for such a young, pretty girl. Later, Grace and Pete investigate more, they get the police involved, and then the dean is actually arrested and sent to an insane asylum. She's suspected to be the Red Devil. Grace and Pete visit her in the asylum, which is very much Silence of the Lamb vibes again, and she mentions casually that she can't eat bologna because it sends her into anaphylactic shock. And then later on, when they come back and they're looking at some stuff from the crime scenes of the dean's ex-husband's dead body, they learn that after killing him, the killer was such a weirdo that they actually sat down to make a sandwich which had bologna in it, and they realize it can't be the dean. Why would she make something that she's allergic to? With new information, the dean is actually released from the asylum and carries on with her teaching position. Later on, we see some narration into the dean's mind, and she mentions that actually she's tricked them all and she did kill her ex-husband. She's not the Red Devil, but she did kill her ex-husband. She intentionally put the bologna sandwich at the scene to send people off trail, not thinking it was her. And also, her husband died really recently too, because she figured if the Red Devil was on the loose murdering people, she may as well take advantage of that and use the opportunity to kill her ex-husband, which sucks. The episode opens with Grace sitting in the dean's office trying to get some information about what happened with the bathtub baby incident and the fact that the dean tried to cover it up. The dean says that because Feather is the Red Devil killer, the murders have nothing to do with what may or may not have happened at Kappa 20 years ago. Grace is really angry though, because the dean had promised them in the last episode that she'd offer up some information this episode about the bathtub baby and what exactly happened, and she's not helping them. But later on, Kathy's in the shower, it's the recreation of that psycho scene, and then the Red Devil attacks her. But she's prepared and she says she's seen that movie Psycho a million times, so she knew what was going to happen.
I saw that movie 50 times.
Hello and welcome to the new 911 automated system. Please listen carefully as our menu options have changed. Also note that 911 is for emergencies only. If you need a ride to the store or McDonald's got your order wrong, please hang up. For operating progress, please press.
So she has actually amazing fighting skills and she fights off the Red Devil, but then another Red Devil appears and someone else working with the Red Devils who's in a different costume. The dean fights off all three of those Red Devils and they end up running away out of fear. I was really not suspecting the dean anymore at this point because it was so clear that all of the Red Devils wanted to take her out and there were too many of them against her. Since now she's been personally affected by these attackers, she realizes she actually wants to help the investigation because she's selfish. She does hand Grace a file that contains the name of the girl who died in the tub, which is Sophia Doyle. The girls in the sorority house later walk down into like the kitchen area. They see Jennifer, the girl who was obsessed with candles, lying there dead. What had happened is Jennifer had been in her room making another candle vlog. The Red Devil had come in and killed her and she hadn't realized that they had come in because she was distracted. At the grind, Grace meets up with Pete to do some investigating on Sophia Doyle and he thinks that he should visit the insane asylum because maybe they'll get some information there. When they're in the asylum, they meet this woman who's a patient there who paints everyone that comes in. So they ask her, since she's got a knack for faces, if she remembers a girl from maybe 20 years ago coming in who like wailed a lot and maybe had a baby with her. The lady then hands them a painting of Gigi wearing a black cloak and holding two babies, one boy and one girl. Grace makes the connection that Gigi must be the hag of Shady Lane, which means she could be a killer, and so her and Pete run out of the asylum with the painting. Later, Grace calls Gigi out on being a liar and a creep. Grace also discovered that Gigi was once a student at Wallace Uni like 20 years ago, but dropped out after her sophomore year for medical reasons, but maybe it was because she'd gone to the insane asylum. But Gigi denies all claims and says that actually she's engaged to Grace's dad, so it's too late. Grace barges in and her dad like, how could you get engaged without telling me? But he says that it was not his idea to get engaged. Gigi started acting like they were engaged and it kind of creeped him out and he didn't want to like rain in her parade, so he didn't say anything, but he ended up boiling it down to, you know what, she's just quirky. The dean announces that she'll be shutting down campus indefinitely because of all these continued murders like Jennifer happening on campus. Chanel's annoyed because she doesn't want her cliquey life to be shut down, her high status life and everyone knowing her and stuff. If there is no uni, then how is she going to have that? So she enlists some detective people to try and find out if Grace and Zayday are the killers, and they do some digging, but they get nothing. But they did find a criminal record for Grace's mum and they hand Chanel the file on Grace's mum. Chanel shows Grace this file and is really nasty and she's like, oh, look at all the bad things your mum got up to. I bet you didn't know about this, did you? Grace's mum was elected Kappa president and ended up hooking up with a douchebag the night of the Kappa party, which was Wes, and she got pregnant. And then 9 months later, Grace was born, which proves that Grace isn't the bathtub baby. And then Grace's mum changed her name from Bethany Stevens to Mary Mulligan in an attempt to put the past behind her. Arrested for like shoplifting, putting a baby on her car. I guess the baby was Grace. Loads of criminal stuff. Wes then sued for custody over Grace and won, and it was very messy. Mary then died 1 year later after drunk driving crashing into a tree, and all of this upsets Grace because that's not the image that her dad painted of her mum at all, and also her mum apparently had died in a fire, not drunk driving, so she was really upset. Oh yeah, she slaps Chanel, and then she goes to talk to her dad about it and he doesn't deny it, so she realizes it's true. Later on though, Grace meets up with Chanel at the coffee shop and Chanel actually apologizes for being so horrible and she genuinely seems apologetic, not just because Denise told her to apologize, but because she genuinely feels bad and she realizes that she's not exactly proud of her family either. The episode closes with Boone, one of our Red Devil killers, who's working out in a gym in a disguise, obviously pretending that he's someone else because everyone thinks Boone is dead, and he's really annoyed that the assassination attempt against the Dean didn't go well, and he's also annoyed that Gigi turned up in a weird costume of like a Supreme Court judge rather than dressed as a Red Devil, and he says she's making a mockery of our murder thing. But in the next episode, Ghost Stories, things get interesting because Boone's walking back from the gym and his disguise falls off and he sees Chanel number 3 and she freaks out and thinks he's a ghost and he doesn't know what to do. He panics. And so he thinks, I'll go and seduce Zayday, pretending I'm the ghost, which means that he was the guy that was in love with Zayday and obsessed with her and laid out that dinner for her. Zayday and Earl Grey are sitting on Zayday's bed and begin to passionately kiss, and Earl Grey says he'll be back later. I love his character, he's so cute. But he goes to leave and gets some chocolate covered strawberries or something and is brutally murdered by Boone. And then Boone goes into Zayday's room pretending to be a ghost and tries to seduce her, but Zayday is very suspicious and knows that obviously he's not a ghost and Boone is alive definitely and one of the killers. Later on he reveals that he was pretending to be gay as a cover, but I'm sorry, what straight man goes around pretending to be gay? What's the point of that? It's just weird. I just assumed, okay, it's not a big deal. He said he was gay. Maybe he's bisexual, or maybe there are some exceptions where he does actually like girls, but everyone frames it like it's so shocking. They're calling him Gay Boone and they're like, how could Gay Boone like Zayday? As if it's so black and white and there's only straight or gay and it's so shocking and there's nothing in between. Anyway, Zayday tries to run away from him or attack him or whatever, and then Boone falls out the window and disappears. Boone later goes to the other Red Devils and he's intent on killing Gigi, and he's like, Gigi, you're not helping us anymore and I know you're the mastermind behind this, but you're just getting in our way. I was expecting them to kill Gigi, but suddenly the other Red Devil who's there, whose identity we don't know yet, turns around and stabs Boone. Hester, the one who wants Chanel's life, confesses that she must be pregnant with Chad's baby, which means that she's the one that can get married to Chad and go to visit his family over Thanksgiving.
I guess we'll just have to see how it goes bringing Chanel home for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I guess we will see, as that's what's gonna happen.
I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, we will wait and see, as Thanksgiving is an event that takes place in the future and therefore it hasn't happened yet. Okay, just so we're clear, I only caught this kiss. So throw it away.
And Hester even admits to her, like, actually, I'm not pregnant. I will be pregnant soon though when I'm with Chad. And it makes Chanel so angry that she pushes Hester down the stairs and it seems like Hester's dead. In the next episode, Thanksgiving, Chanel admits to Chad that Hester pretended to be pregnant and that she pushed her down the stairs. And so Chanel leads him down to the freezer to show where she'd put Hester's body, but Hester isn't there anymore. She's gone. So Chad takes Chanel instead of Hester to go to Thanksgiving with his family and spend time with his family, but his whole family's horrible to Chanel. And then the worst part is that Hester isn't actually dead when she fell down the stairs because she just turns up and kind of gate crashes the party, which is extremely awkward. But then the family ends up being mean to both of them, and then it's actually sweet. Chanel ends up standing up for Hester and defending her, leaving the party together as sorority sisters again, and neither of them end up choosing Chad. Pete shows up at Kappa and accuses Wes of being a killer because he'd discovered that Wes was actually Boone's father and thus the father of the other bathtub baby. But then Wes says that's not the case at all, and he says that he was a bit of a man slut, his words not mine, in college, and that he'd hooked up with the girl who died in the bathtub. But he didn't know that he'd made her pregnant. He wouldn't have known that Boone was his kid and that the other baby girl was his kid either. So they sit down to have their Thanksgiving dinner and lift the plate off the turkey, so they do that. But instead of a turkey on the plate, it's Gigi's decapitated head, and everyone starts screaming. Now, as iconic as that scene was, I have to say that this Thanksgiving episode and the last episode, Ghost Stories, are definitely the two weakest episodes in the whole season because they're very slow and mostly uneventful. The last episode, Ghost Stories, focused on Denise telling the girls stories about ghosts and things to scare them. And then in this Thanksgiving episode, there was a lot of time dedicated to the girls visiting their families, which felt very kind of pointless. And I mean, stuff like Gigi's head being on the plate was eventful, but a lot of stuff wasn't. After the horror-filled events of Thanksgiving, the girls decide they need to clear their head and do some shopping for Black Friday. So they go to the mall together. But then No one else is really there. They arrived too late when the mall was shutting and they didn't know, which I've done before, to be fair, so it's not totally unrealistic, because I've turned up like at 5 thinking it will be open and it's shut. They're locked in and all the lights start to go off and the killer chases them around and actually shoots Chanel in the shoulder, but luckily the police managed to come in time and intervene and save her. But after that horrifying event, everyone talks about it and agrees that they think the dean is the killer because of various evidence, and they realize that they obviously, because logic, need to kill her or the killings will keep happening to them. And this is the moment that Grace, who's meant to be the good girl, actually goes along with it and thinks it's a good idea. They're so casual about it too, by the way. They're like, should we kill the dean? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's what I thought. Cool, let's do it. They're so casual. So they try to kill the dean at multiple points, but they keep failing. The one scene I actually felt really bad for Chanel is at the end when she goes to the pool and invites the dean to meet her there, and the girls had agreed that she'd like distract the dean and then they'd kill the dean or something. The dean turns up to talk to her and it looks really awkward because no one's there except for Chanel, because the other girls bailed on her and didn't turn up. And then the dean starts to catch on and realize the girls have been trying to kill her, and she intimidates the crap out of Chanel.
Well, where is everybody?
Actually, I don't know.
She goes to write this email to tell off all of the girls. Grace, meanwhile, goes to hang out with Pete, and she actually wants to try and sleep with him because she really likes him. Pete suddenly stops her and is like, no, Grace, I don't want to, because I don't want your first time to be with a killer. Dun, dun, dun. The boyfriend's the killer? You heard right, ladies and gentlemen. One of the killers, there's still one more, but one of the main killers is Pete, which I love. I love that they went there and took that risk. The next episode is Dorkus, which is an amazing episode, and I'm kind of gutted that this episode is so much pacier and more juicy than the actual finale, which I feel like is such a mistake. The finale should always be better than the episode before it, in my opinion. Pete has this very gripping scene with Grace, which is one of her better scenes, where he keeps trying to rationalize why he was joining the Red Devil, which she's disgusted by. Boone and his twin sister are some of the killers, but also him. He claims responsibility for killing Roger, who was Chanel number 5's boyfriend, and the attempted murder of Chanel at the mall. And he killed Boone too and betrayed him. And he also said that he killed the cop at the mall, but it was just a self-defense. It's an excellent scene because Pete reflects the lack of morality in herself, because as I said in the last few episodes, Grace's morality has not been where it should be. She was trying to kill the dean at multiple points and didn't see the problem with that because it was for a good reason, which is fighting fire with fire. And it's not, I mean, it's an eye for an eye, but is that really a good thing? And so Pete says to her, oh, I was a killer, but I did it for A, B, and C reasons, which I think are very good reasons, and so therefore I think it's a good idea. And Grace is like, babe, no, that doesn't justify it. He's like, yeah, but I did it for a good reason. And she's like, no, you killed innocent people. And he's like, what are you talking about? You were going to kill the dean. And she was like, yeah, but that's not the same because I thought she was the killer. But you see what I mean? She's getting triggered because she kind of knows that he reflects the inner darkness in herself. However, you have to admit that Pete is still a way worse person than Grace. I mean, he was pretending to care about finding out who the Red Devil murderers were while simultaneously being a murderer. Trying to kill Chanel? What? Because she rejected you once? Like, it's ridiculous. And Grace is repulsed by the way he keeps trying to say, oh, but you said this one thing once about the Red Devil not being too bad, so that must mean you're okay with me being the Red Devil, right? And she's like, what are you talking about? No, that was just a throwaway comment. I didn't actually mean it was okay to kill people. Then she's about to leave and Pete tries to keep her in the room by saying, look, stay and I'll tell you who the last killer is. Like, oh, shut up, mate. And he says it's one of your sorority sisters. But before he can tell her, the Red Devil comes out of the closet and stabs him in the throat. There's an email Chanel was sending to her sorority sisters to tell them off for not helping her kill the dean, but the Red Devil leaks it to the whole school and it goes viral, and everyone's so disgusted by the way she would talk to her fellow sorority sisters that everyone hates her. She's really embarrassed and is actually considering killing herself, which I thought was played off way too lightly into a kind of joke. Zayday comes to talk to her. She's the bigger person, which I thought was really nice, and she also says, you can't say the first horrible thing that pops into your mind every time, Chanel. I have a real problem with your casual racism, which I like because no one ever actually addresses it and it always really bothered me. Just then the Red Devil bursts into Chanel's room and they're like, how did you get in? It was just a helpless pizza delivery guy who was forced into the costume that the Red Devil wears, and he's actually got a bunch of bombs strapped to him and he was just sent in there to scare them.
I'm gonna explode.
What?
You should probably let him use the bathroom. No! I'm gonna explode!
And so he can't like unstrap himself out of the costume, and then the bomb goes off and he dies. But he said he was forced to impersonate the Red Devil by an unknown female. And Hester claims that the woman was wearing a veil and mumbling Dorkus or something. And it sounds a lot like Melanie Dorkus, who was the girl who was the victim of Chanel's acid attack in the pilot, because that's what had happened to her. She was having spray tan put on her, and then it actually was acid and it burned her skin. So they think it's a good idea because maybe she is the killer and she's resentful against Chanel or something, even though Chanel claims that she never put acid in the spray and she really thought it was spray tan. But anyway, they all go to the girl's house. Chanel genuinely thinks she's the killer, so she tries to attack and stab Melanie, and all the girls are like, see, Chanel's the killer. And Chanel's like, no, I'm trying to kill her because I think she's the killer. And at this point, I really didn't think Chanel was the killer, nor did I think Melanie was the killer, because she's this really irrelevant character we don't even know anything about. Grace then decides to make a plan to expose the killer once and for all. Wes will have to seduce the dean, which won't be a problem because there's been a long time attraction there. And while he does that, Grace and Zayday will sneak into the dean's house and get any relevant files and information that they need. Grace and Zayday begin looking through the dean's laptop, and they find nothing really interesting about the Chanels, but it's Hester's transcript that's interesting to them because it's completely fabricated. She's not even qualified to be at this uni. What is she doing here? How did she get in? And I was really hoping this was just a final red herring or final false alarm before the finale, because I was just like, it's not going to be Hester. I mean, come on, she is the most obvious cringy red herring ever. They return to Kappa House to go and confront Hester, but they see her lying in Chanel's closet with a stiletto heel stuck in her eye and she's unconscious. But then she sits up and points at Chanel number 5, saying Chanel number 5 is the killer. And God, I was really hoping it was Chanel number 5. I was like, yes, that would make a lot of sense. Good motive. The next episode is called The Final Girls. So the episode opens with a fast forward to a year later, and Zayday and Grace are now still alive, and both the president and vice president of Kappa Kappa Tau. Hester is still alive as well. All the Chanels, including Chanel number 1, seem to have disappeared, which is very suspicious. I get what the show was trying to do here. They're trying to play with timelines. I felt like it was so anticlimactic and it really killed the tension, and I would appreciate it so much more if they just followed everything chronologically, because somehow it just, for the finale, it was like, oh, okay, so I know that a year later, Hester will still be alive and well, Zayday is still alive, Grace is still alive. You know what I mean? It gives me all these answers too early. They're all announcing how excited they are for this new sorority and blah, blah, blah. We're only a minute into the episode, and suddenly we start zooming into Hester's smiling face. And she reveals through her narration that she is the killer. No, I'm not kidding. I'm not even joking. It's so disappointing. She says, oh, I'm the only Chanel left because I got away with all the murders on campus. The bad guy finally won. Look how I did it. And it's not, do you know how bad that is? It's not like someone figured it out and confronted her. She just chose to reveal it. And I just think that's so cringe. It's not as if they hinted a few times subtly that she has some murderous tendencies. They laid it out on a silver platter. They could not have tried harder to make it like obvious, and I just hate that when there were so many other good suspects, any of which I would have preferred. There's a flashback to last year where it's revealed that she stabbed her own eye with a stiletto heel after studying in depth her own eye socket, what angle she'd need to do it at so that she wouldn't hit any vital organs or her brain, etc. Hester then reveals that she is in fact Boone's twin and she was the other baby in the bathtub. Gigi took care of them after the lady in the bathtub died, and so they were raised in an insane asylum with Gigi, who was sent there because she was like their mother figure.
Gigi was pretty bummed out about her sister killing herself with laxatives, and she cried a lot.
Hammers are good for bashing people in the skull and watching them bleed to death, okay? Now how about this? Knife!
Boone decided that he'd pretend to be gay as a cover, but Hester felt like that was a really weird cover, and she thought that her way of making herself seem vulnerable and not like a killer wouldn't be by pretending to be gay, but it would be by wearing a neck brace and pretending to have really bad scoliosis, and also by making herself seem really weird and cringy and dorky. Boone had shown up at Wallace Uni a year before her, so it would be obvious they were not related and they weren't twins, but he never actually enrolled in college there. He just joined the fraternity, but those boys never actually went to their classes anyway. No one suspected that he shouldn't actually have been on the uni campus. But as for Hester, she felt like that was really lazy and a tacky move, so she thought she'd actually try and legitimately get into the college. So she applied, but she faked a whole bunch of stuff on her resume because obviously she was raised in an asylum, and the dean knew that but still decided to let her into the college because she realized they didn't have enough special needs kids there or people with disabilities. When Gigi was showing her around the college and stuff, a guy in the Red Devil mascot appeared, and then suddenly that's when Hester realized that's what she wanted to wear for the murders because it was red, so blood wouldn't damage it or stain it or anything. And also, since it's a school mascot, you could totally wear the disguise to be anonymous, but no one would think it was weird because it's the school mascot, so you wouldn't be drawing any attention to yourself. Boone was the one who filled that spray tan machine with acid that burned Melanie Dorkus' skin, so Chanel was not responsible for hurting her, and Hester was the one who turned on the deep fat fryer that killed Miss Bean, which genuinely means that Chanel was framed both those times. It's pretty clear Hester's framed the Chanels for the murders and pretended they're the Red Devil because she, with this stiletto heel in her eye, points at Chanel number 5 and shouts that she's the Red Devil, like, you tried to kill me. Then Grace and Zayde go, no, Hester, we know you faked your school application and your transcript and you're the killer. But Hester makes up all these excuses like, I only lied because I was embarrassed to say I was homeschooled and all this, and she basically gets away with it and lies. There's also no record of Hester's parents, but she hires like these actors to come and pretend to be her parents and arrive, and then she comes up with all these excellent reasons and motives and clues as to why Chanel and her Chanels would be the killers, and it's very convincing. And Denise, the security woman, listens to it and she's like, you know what, I'm going to arrest Chanel and the other Chanels. And then the police come in to arrest them and they try to run away and escape. It's meant to be comical, it's comedy, right? Not logic. But this scene pushed my suspension of disbelief a little bit too much, and it was just a bit too stupid. The fact that everyone would just sit there and allow Hester to take up the space and accuse everyone else but her of being a killer was a little bit ridiculous to me, especially for even people like Grace and Zayde to go along with it. She'd actually put a lot of thought into how she'd frame the Chanels, but still, I thought it was a bit ridiculous. Hester's, recovering, pretending everything's fine, but then the dean approaches her and she says that she knows for a fact that Hester is the killer, and she's known that from day one because she was the one that obviously covered up that woman's death in the bathtub, and she saw the 2 babies that were born, and even now she was like, that's the baby from the bathtub. And Hester's like, if you try and turn me in, I will prove and tell everyone that you actually were the one to kill your husband, you covering up that pregnant woman's death 20 years ago.
And move on to our very happy and successful, best-selling lives.
Okay, great. Take care.
You too.
During their trials, the Chanels are sentenced to life in a mental asylum. And this could work, but what irritates me is how the show tries to put this positive spin in it by having Chanel say, wow, you know what, this asylum isn't too bad. I can eat what I want, there's no pressure to be in a clique, I'm actually forming a friendship with these girls, I feel relaxed, and I'm actually the head boss girl of all the patients. And I was like, come on. I think it was meant to be funny, but it just felt like such a deviation from her character that it really lacked plausibility. I'm sorry, but if you were wrongfully accused of being a serial killer and then chucked into an insane asylum where you have to wear these disgusting clothes, I would be fuming. I would be very angry. And she's so accepting of this fate, which I also don't buy. And I also don't like the end scene, which is her being attacked in bed and screaming, because I know it's meant to be suspenseful and leave it open to interpretation as to whether Chanel's killed or not or something, but I just found that stupid and dumb. So I didn't love the final episode, to be honest. Not only who the killer was, I didn't like that Hester was one of the killers, especially because the other ones had been pretty strong, actually. I didn't like how they revealed Hester being the killer because they had her break the 4th wall and talk to the camera. But that being said, I still would like to watch season 2, so give this video a thumbs up, and if it does get enough thumbs ups, then I will definitely do a deep dive into season 2 and 3 as well. I put so much bloody work into this video and I had 25 pages of notes, so I'd appreciate it if you subscribe too, and I will see you guys for the next video.